Have you ever caught yourself replaying a moment in your head, not just as a memory, but as a kind of story? Maybe it was something small, you stumbled during a presentation, and hours later you're still narrating it to yourself like, I always mess things up when the pressure is on. Or maybe it was something positive. A stranger smiled at you on the street, and you find yourself weaving a narrative about being more approachable than you thought. We don't just experience life as raw data, we experience it as a story, complete with characters, themes, and arcs. And the most surprising part, the main author of that story is you, even when you're not aware of writing it. In this video, we'll explore why your brain is such a compulsive storyteller, how these inner narratives quietly build your identity, and how you can learn to edit them so they serve you instead of trap you. Let's start with the basics. Your brain loves order. Cognitive psychology shows us that the mind is uncomfortable with randomness. When something happens, whether big or small, your brain automatically tries to stitch it into a pattern, a cause and effect sequence that makes sense. Imagine dropping puzzle pieces onto a table. Your brain doesn't leave them scattered. It compulsively tries to fit them into a picture. That picture becomes the narrative you tell yourself, and these narratives can be powerful. Think about the difference between I failed this exam versus I am a failure. The first is an event. The second is a story, and it changes how you see yourself going forward. This tendency has deep evolutionary roots. Our ancestors survived by making sense of a chaotic world. Rustling in the bushes wasn't just sound, it was a story about possible danger. A good hunt wasn't just calories, it became a tale of skill and leadership that reinforced social bonds. We are wired to turn experience into narrative because stories gave us survival advantages. But in modern life, that wiring often runs on autopilot, creating inner scripts that can either expand or limit us. Let's make it concrete. Imagine two people who go through the exact same breakup. One person narrates it as, I always attract the wrong partners. I'm doomed to repeat this. Another person narrates, this breakup is painful, but it's a sign I'm learning what I really need. Same event, two different stories, two radically different futures. This is what psychologists call narrative identity, the way the stories you tell yourself become the backbone of who you believe you are. And because these stories are so automatic, we often don't question them. They feel like truth when they're really interpretation. So why do we hold on to certain stories and not others? Here's where memory research gives us a clue. When you recall a moment, your brain doesn't just replay a recording. It reconstructs the scene, often highlighting details that confirm your existing narrative while fading out the ones that don't fit. If your inner story is, I'm unlucky, your brain will spotlight the times things went wrong and conveniently forget the times they didn't. The story filters reality. That's why two siblings can grow up in the same household and tell completely different stories about their childhood. One focuses on neglect, the other on resilience. Both are true, but their brains chose different narratives to emphasize, and those choices shaped their adult identities. Now let's turn to the practical side. If our inner stories are so powerful, what can we do to work with them instead of being ruled by them? The first step is noticing. Begin by paying attention to the stories you tell yourself most often. Maybe it's I'm always behind, or I can't trust people, or I thrive under pressure. Write them down, not as facts, but as scripts. Seeing them on paper helps you realize these aren't the universe's objective truths, they're drafts your brain keeps recycling. Once you notice them, the second step is questioning. Ask, where did this story come from? Is it really mine, or did I inherit it from parents, teachers, or past experiences? Many of our most stubborn narratives are hand-me-downs we've never examined. For example, if you grew up hearing, you're the responsible one, you might carry a story of being the caretaker long into adulthood, even when it drains you. Questioning creates space between you and the script. The third step is editing. And here's the liberating part. Editing doesn't mean lying to yourself or pretending pain didn't happen. It means reframing the narrative in a way that gives you agency instead of trapping you. Instead of, I failed, therefore I'm weak, you might edit it to, I failed, therefore I have data about what doesn't work, and that makes me wiser for the next attempt. Editing stories is a bit like editing a movie. The raw footage is the same, but the way you cut it, the soundtrack, the scenes you emphasize, the order you put them in, completely changes the emotional impact. And just like a movie editor, you get to decide what kind of film your life feels like. Tragedy, comedy, hero's journey, or something else. Here's a thought experiment you can try tonight. Take a recent event that frustrated you. Maybe you missed an opportunity at work, argued with a friend, or wasted time scrolling online. Write down the default story your brain is telling. Maybe it's, I'm incompetent, or "They don't respect me," or "I have no self-control." Then, deliberately write two alternative stories. One version that's more constructive. "This was a reminder of what I value and what I want to improve." And another version that's more compassionate. "Of course I struggled. Anyone in my situation would. And that doesn't erase my strengths." Notice how, with just a few sentences, your experience shifts from a dead-end script to an open-ended one. The power is not in erasing reality, but in choosing the frame. You might be wondering, isn't this just positive thinking? Not quite. Positive thinking often tries to plaster over discomfort with forced optimism. Narrative editing, by contrast, respects reality. It acknowledges what happened, but it refuses to let the most limiting version of the story define you. It's about expanding possibilities, not denying difficulties. Another layer worth exploring is how our inner stories connect to culture. Each society has dominant narratives: the story of the self-made individual, the martyr parent, the starving artist. We absorb these collective plots without realizing it, and they shape our private scripts. For example, if your culture glorifies endless productivity, your inner story might tell you, "I only matter if I'm constantly busy." Recognizing cultural narratives is key, because sometimes the story holding you back isn't personal, it's collective. Once you see that, you gain permission to write a different kind of script, one that serves your life instead of just repeating the cultural script handed to you. All of this brings us to identity itself. Who are you really? Many philosophers argue that the self is not a fixed essence but a narrative thread. You are the stories you tell about yourself, revised and updated across time. That might sound unsettling at first, but it's actually empowering. Because if the self is a story, it means you can be both the author and the protagonist. And you don't need to scrap the whole book. You can revise chapters, add new ones, and reinterpret old scenes with fresh eyes. Think about the times in your life when you changed dramatically. Maybe moving to a new city, starting a relationship, or surviving a crisis. Each time, part of what shifted wasn't just circumstances, but the story you told about who you were in that context. I'm a risk taker now. I'm someone who survived. I'm someone who can love again. Those stories became the bridges between your past self and your future self. And when you're intentional, you don't have to wait for big events to rewrite them. You can start the process in small, deliberate ways right now. So how do you actually begin to rewrite your inner narratives in a way that feels real, not forced? One effective approach is what psychologists call narrative reframing. It starts with awareness, but then goes further by actively experimenting with different interpretations of the same event. Imagine you just gave a presentation at work and stumbled on your words. Your default story might be, "I embarrassed myself." But if you look again, you could reframe it as, "I pushed through nerves and kept going," which shows resilience. Both stories describe the same footage, but the second version highlights growth instead of shame. When you repeat this process consistently, the new framing starts to sink in as part of your identity. Another powerful tool is journaling, but not just as a diary of events. Try narrative journaling, where you take a recent experience and write it in third person, as if you're describing the main character of a novel. This small shift creates distance between you and the story, allowing you to see it with fresh eyes. You might notice strengths you overlooked, or patterns you didn't realize were there. Writing in third person helps you step into the role of editor instead of just character. You can also try future storying. This involves imagining yourself 5 years from now and writing a page of your autobiography from that perspective. Instead of focusing only on what has been, you draft a narrative about what could be. The key here is not fantasy but plausibility. In the last 5 years, I learned to set boundaries. I developed healthier friendships. I shifted careers. By articulating it as though it already happened, you create a roadmap that your mind can begin working toward. It's like planting narrative seeds in the present that grow into future possibilities. Of course, rewriting your stories doesn't mean erasing pain. Trauma, mistakes, and regrets are part of everyone's plotline. The goal is not to delete those chapters, but to integrate them into a larger arc. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote that humans can endure almost any what if they have a why. In other words, suffering becomes bearable when it's placed within a meaningful story. You can't always control what happens, but you can influence the narrative frame. Is this the chapter where you break, or the chapter where you discover unexpected strength? That choice changes everything. There's also a social dimension to our storytelling. We don't only narrate to ourselves, we narrate to others. The way you explain your life to a friend, a partner, or even a stranger shapes not only how they see you, but how you see yourself. When you keep telling the story, "I'm the unlucky one," that narrative becomes reinforced through social feedback. On the other hand, when you experiment with telling stories of resilience, creativity, or humor, those identities get reflected back to you. This is why therapy can be so powerful. It offers a safe space to practice new narratives about yourself, and having another person witness them makes them more real. But let's bring this down to daily life, because you don't need therapy or a dramatic life event to begin reshaping your narrative identity. Start with small, everyday edits. If your inner monologue after a mistake is, "I ruined everything," try pausing and saying, "I made a mistake, and I'm learning." If you catch yourself telling the story, "People don't like me," test it against reality by noticing even small moments of connection. A smile, a conversation, a gesture of kindness. Each time you choose a different narrative, it's like adding a new thread to the fabric of your identity. Over time, those threads can weave an entirely different pattern. Another technique is what I call the highlight reel exercise. At the end of each day, instead of replaying only the moments that went wrong, deliberately pick 3 moments that could belong to a positive story. It could be as small as holding the door for someone, finishing a task you procrastinated on, or simply noticing something beautiful on your walk. When you collect these highlights, you're giving your brain raw material for alternative narratives, ones that emphasize competence, kindness, or appreciation. It's not about ignoring the negatives. It's about balancing the story so it's not just tragedy but a fuller, richer tale. You might be wondering, won't this make me delusional if I just keep rewriting things? That's a valid concern. The truth is, everyone is already editing. Your brain doesn't store objective reality. It stores interpreted fragments stitched together into a coherent plot. Rewriting is not about lying. It's about choosing interpretations that expand your possibilities rather than shrink them. The danger lies in rigid stories, whether overly negative or unrealistically positive. The healthiest narratives are flexible, adaptive, and open-ended. This is where philosophy and psychology meet. Philosophers like Paul Ricoeur argued that identity is narrative. We become who we are by telling stories that link the past, present, and future. Modern psychology echoes this, showing that people with more coherent life stories, ones that make sense of both hardships and triumphs, report higher levels of well-being. The stories don't have to be heroic, but they do need to give you a sense of continuity and meaning. So let's put this into practice with a toolkit you can start using today. Step 1. Awareness. Catch the stories your brain is already telling you. Notice the recurring lines like, "I never finish things," or "I'm the reliable one." Step 2. Reflection. Ask whether those stories are helping you grow or keeping you stuck. Step 3. Experiment. Rewrite one of those scripts in a way that's still true but more empowering. For example, change "I never finish things" to "I struggle with finishing, but I've completed more than I give myself credit for, and I can build on that." Step 4. Reinforcement. Share the new story, write it down, revisit it. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Over time, your brain learns to default to narratives that align with the life you want to live. Think of yourself as both author and character. As the author, you have creative control over framing, pacing, and interpretation. As the character, you live out the plot as it unfolds with all its unpredictability. The magic happens when those two roles are in dialogue, when you, as author, gently guide the story without denying the raw experience of the character. That's where growth lives, in the balance between truth and interpretation. So next time you catch your mind narrating, whether it's about a mistake, a triumph, or even a mundane moment, pause and ask, is this the only story I can tell? Or is there another version that's truer to who I want to become? Remember, your life is not a fixed script. It's a series of drafts, always open to revision. And in those revisions lies the power to transform not just how you see the past, but how you step into the future. If this perspective resonated with you, share it with someone you know who also struggles with their inner stories. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us here at Mind Unlocked, your toolkit for better thinking, for deeper self-understanding, and for crafting a life story that feels not only coherent but truly alive.